I'm a paleontologist. Sometimes I call myself a paleobiologist because my work is very biological. I'm halfway between biology and geology. Geologists think I'm a biologist, biologists think I'm a geologist. We have a difficult time finding a place for ourselves. But most of us are in geological departments or earth science departments, and I am, always have been. I grew up in a beautiful village, not within the village proper, but on the outskirts of the village, in northeastern Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland called Gates Mills. My mother liked wildflowers. My father was a hunter and fisherman. They both were bird watchers. I spent a lot of time in the woods. I got interested in both biology and geology as a kid. And we moved out along the river. The Gates Mills was in the Chagrin River Valley. The Chagrin River has been named a National Scenic River since then. It was a beautiful place to be a kid. And I learned a lot about what was around me. I was a country boy. I went to a boys' school in the 7th grade in town in Shaker Heights, which was adjacent to Cleveland. The main thing I did there that connected me to what I do now is, what I did was write a senior thesis. We all had to write a senior thesis. Mine was on the geologic and economic history of the Chagrin River Valley. And I climbed up and down the tributaries of the Chagrin River and took photographs, and I got literature from the state on the geology of the region, learned a lot about rivers. I also collected minerals. As a kid, just a couple times, I went to Colorado with a man who was a wonderful friend of mine, a family friend who was a very prominent doctor. He took me out with his family for a month to collect minerals in Colorado. That was after my sophomore year. After my junior year, I went up to the upper Peninsula of Michigan, pretty far north, and collected minerals there. So I had a mineral collection when I graduated from school. I went to Princeton for college, majored in geology. I knew I wanted to major in geology when I went there. I should say at this point that something that really has affected my life is I learned at the age of 46 that I have ADD, attention deficit disorder. Nobody knew this when I was growing up. Nobody knew who I was, really. I heard someone at a cocktail party talking about having a disability. It sounded familiar. I talked to her and got a recommendation about how to get tested. And it was really a jolt. No one had ever known this. I was a hyperactive kid. I was the most punished kid in my school in the 1st and 2nd grade. But I also was told, the first thing the man told me was that my IQ was too high to measure by the adult Wechsler scale, which stops at 150. And no one had ever known this about me. I walked out of this man's office on the final day and looked up at the sky. It was 100 degrees, a perfect blue sky. But I've never known who I am. No one's ever known who I am. And it took me about, well, many months to get over this, to adjust to it. But it really was very important to finally learn who I really was. And I hated school. I loved the school I went to. I knew it'd be the same anywhere else. But the memorization tasks were awful for me. I was a better athlete than student, actually. I was a major soccer player. I was the captain and most valuable player on the soccer team. And the coach at the end of the season said that more than one opposing coach asked if I was a ringer from Europe. And at graduation, I received the highest award the school offered, the Academy Award. It was for, you had to be a good student, not the best necessarily, but it was for good citizenship and leadership. And they said, sterling character. I was a straight arrow. I thought I'd become a mining scientist. I'd work for a mining company dealing with ore deposits, which is really geochemistry. And there was a man in the department at Princeton who'd done work and done research in ore deposits, a professor. And I talked to him at the end of my sophomore year about my doing this. And he saw my grades in chemistry and my calculus failure. And he just said, "You can't do this, forget it, do something else." Dismissed me. So I'd take his mineralogy course in the fall the next year. And everyone was frightened of his mineralogy course. Good students got bad grades in his course. And early in the course, he would interrupt his lectures and say, "Steve, are you with me? Steve, do you understand?" He decided I was the class dolt. Until he gave the midterm. I got a 99 in the midterm. I got a 96 on the final. And I got a 1+, which is like an A+ in the course. Very rare grade back then. This was before grade inflation. Maybe 1% of grades were 1+. Mineralogy was unheard of. The reason was, I knew the reason, it was because it wasn't a memorization course. You didn't have to memorize things very much for the test. He would give you problems to solve, things to figure out, things you'd never seen before, sorts of things you've never seen before. And I got every one of them right. I'd take up a point here, maybe a point there, but every single question I got right because I could figure the things out. And suddenly my life changed. I got into paleontology actually because of a biology course, a beginning biology course at Princeton, where the theme was evolution. And a very prominent professor, great lecturer. And I got excited about evolution. And I took a course from Al Fisher in geology and paleontology the same year. And he brought fossils to life, but it wasn't fossils that got me into paleontology. It was intellectual excitement about evolution. The writing of my book in macroevolution, which had a big impact in biology as well as geology, I was making a case for punctuational evolution, which is the idea that evolution occurs mainly when species first originate. Now it's Eldridge and Steve Gould, who had written about this to begin with. It was really Eldridge's idea. But they wrote a paper that attracted a lot of attention. And they said the fossil record couldn't tell if it was right. And my father-in-law had died, and I was down at his house where he had lived with his wife, sitting in a soft chair, quiet time. And I thought of tests for the punctuational model. And I thought of implications of it, how you develop large-scale trends, just in a few minutes. And I wrote a small paper which attracted a whole lot of reprint requests. Decided I should write a book. And so I wrote that book. And it's still, now it's almost 40 years old, but it's still cited about 40 times a year. It has more than 2,000 citations. It has had a lasting impact. I've done lots of other things I'm proud of, but that had the biggest impact. I'm a creative person. I always say that if people ask me who I really am, I'm basically a creative person. My father was an inventor. He had an engineering degree. He invented a machine that polished all the ball bearings in North America. He always had projects. And he always emphasized it was more important to have original ideas than to know everything. He had a very poor memory himself, but he was very smart. And I was encouraged by being associated with him to be creative. I valued it too. He once said to me that his mind and mine didn't work like other people's minds. Well, I guess for biologists and paleontologists in the future, the work I've done, I hope it will last. And I've written books that will be there. I also have taught. I've had a textbook in Earth history now it's in its 7th edition. It's been there for about 30 years. And that's been used by about 500,000 students. And I hope they remember some of it, and they will pass along knowledge that they've learned from me by way of my textbook. I would like them to be concerned about the environment and do everything they can to preserve the environment, to be worried about global warming, which is real, and try to encourage everyone to do something about it. But I also think that I think everyone should make their best effort and be ethical and kind. If you do those things, you've done what you should do in life. And you should encourage your children to do those two things. If they give their best effort, however good they are at something, and if they are ethical and behave themselves, follow the law, are kind to people, that's all anybody could be expected of. That's what I would suggest for everybody in general. Well, I like to be remembered as a really good scientist and as a kind person and a generous person. I try to be kind and generous, especially to younger people. Because of my stature, if I encourage a young person or I compliment a young person, it means a lot to them. And there are a couple of people who did that for me, Ernst Mayr and E.O. Wilson, very prominent men at Harvard, biologists who, once they'd seen my work, they became my champions. And I try to help younger people get ahead in various ways. I get them to help get promoted, to receive awards they deserve.